Thank you very much, Las Cahirlock, and you're very welcome, Minister. What I'm going to talk about is that last point that you raised about the most vulnerable and the impact of climate on the most vulnerable. And I'm particularly here talking about our global responsibilities. I was involved in the negotiation for the programme for government when it came to foreign affairs, and particularly important to me was that sense that we need to really ramp things up when it comes to our global responsibilities. And there are three things in particular that I'd point to, Minister. Number one is the ODA budget, which I'll come back to. Number two is climate finance itself and the increased commitment from the government and Eamon Ryan in particular at COP26 last year. And I'd like to ask where we are on that. And the third is that we use our UN Security Council seat for climate action reasons. And I do have my doubts whether that is what's actually happening with that UN Security Council seat. So I'd like to see some evidence, and I'd like to see some transparency across government as to how that is being used. I think it's really important that we bring to this chamber those global responsibilities, because when it comes to famines right across the world, it can seem so far removed from the everyday life experiences of all of us. And we all have struggles, and all of our constituents across the country have struggles. But actually, Ireland is amongst one of the richest countries in the world in terms of what's actually in the pot when it comes to our budget. And that's why I want to make sure that the budget is used effectively for the poorest people in the world. And greenhouse gas emissions in Ireland are 54 times that of Somalia, which I'm going to particularly talk about. Because right now, the Horn of Africa is in crisis. Up to this point, 1 in 5 children under the age of 5 dies from malnutrition in this world, and this planet that we are all here to protect, wherever we live in the world. And so those of us who are in the richest part of the world, those of us who actually have those high emissions, have a greater responsibility to those children. And Trócaire and Dóchas in particular are suggesting to us that 350,000 children are likely to die in the Horn of Africa this summer alone. Even to think of one child dying from malnutrition is absolutely devastating to me. And so we can't, as a government, knowing as we do the reality for these people, turn a blind eye. And this is an opportunity, I think, when we have these transition statements to bring up all aspects of climate. So this is the one that I've decided to talk about today, because I really do want to be a spokesperson, I suppose, in the chamber for Dóchas and for Trócaire to make sure that the message comes across. Because I know I was on television with Caoimhe de Barra last week, and I gave a commitment that I would present what their budget submission is, and they are seeking an additional 233 million in budget 2023 to put us on the path to our ODA target, which again, we made sure, and you were in the room with me as well when we were negotiating, and we made sure that we had in the programme for government our commitment to get us to 0.7% by 2030. And we're still way off. We're still, even with the increase in the budget of 176 million in 2021, that still only brings us to 0.32% of GNI. So we're way off, and we need to do much better in budget 2023. And as well as that, I suppose, just to go back, I think it's really important to say that there has been a doubling of climate finance, and that's really important, and it's recognised by these organisations as well, the commitment of this government. But let's make sure that we get the message out loud and clear that that has to actually be a reality. So we are to get, by 2025, we are to get 225 million per year in climate finance. That means a real stepping up now when it comes to the next budget. The other, I suppose, important point to say is that, there's two things when people ask me, how do we deal with this situation? And this is predominantly, I suppose I should say, this is predominantly because of climate, this hunger, this drought. This is the fourth rainy season in a row, and likely to be the worst on record for the people, particularly in Ethiopia, Kenya and Somalia. And how do we deal with that? Well, there has to be two things. Number one is everything that you've outlined, Minister. The reason that the Greens went into government is because we have to make the changes in our countries which emit the most. And 10% of the richest countries in the world emit 52% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the world. So that's a massive job. It can't be done by Somalia and Kenya and Ethiopia. It has to be done by us. And we take that responsibility really seriously. And the other part is adaptation. And it is ensuring that, we have to ensure that we have the finance, and we have to ensure that we are assisting people to get beyond where they are now. When you live in a country that is on the equator, you can't rely on your seasons. You have no ability, you have no backup, you have no economy behind you that can ensure that you put food on the table. We're seeing now the crisis as well in terms of trying to get grain out of Ukraine, and that impacts us. We talk about our farmers and the impact of that grain not getting to our agriculture and to our farmers. It really does deeply impact them. But you know who it impacts most? And that is the people who are living in extreme poverty and malnutrition already, and that's the people of Africa. And that is why we have an obligation, yes, to bring Ukrainians to our country who are fleeing war, but also then to deal with the knock-on for the global most vulnerable people in the world. Thank you very much, Minister, for the opportunity to bring this up.